Muy buenos días. Bienvenidos a la presentación de resultados del informe Colombia, explotación de oro de aluvión, evidencias a partir de percepción remota correspondiente al año 2021. Saludamos a todas las personas que se conectan hasta ahora a la transmisión por la página de Facebook del Ministerio de Minas y Energía y el canal de YouTube de UNODC. Igualmente, los invitamos a seguir el evento en nuestras redes sociales a través de los numerales EBOA y explotación oro aluvión. Numeral EBOA, numeral explotación oro aluvión. La elaboración del informe que presentamos hoy se llevó a cabo en el marco de cooperación entre la Oficina de las Naciones Unidas contra la Droga y el Delito para la región andina y el Cono Sur con el Gobierno Nacional, en cabeza del Ministerio de Minas y Energía y con el apoyo de la Embajada de Estados Unidos en Colombia, de la sección de asuntos antinarcóticos y de aplicación de la ley. En la mesa principal.
In the main table, we have the reps of the organizations that supported the preparation of this report. We would like to greet Mr. Ministry of Mining and Energy, Diego Mesa Pulio, and Director of the Anti-Narcotic Issues in the Application of Law from the Embassy of the United States, Brian Harris, and the Regional Director, of UNODC for the Andean region, and the South Cone, Pierre Lepac. After the starting words from our guest, Ms. Sandra Rodriguez, coordinator of the digital procedure area of the satellite imaging of the UNODC, will be in charge of the presentation of the report and of all the most important findings for 2021. So we will begin with the words in behalf of Mr. Pierre Lepierre, the Regional Director of UNODC for the Andean region and the South Cone.
Muy buenos días. Un cordial saludo al Ministro de Minas y Energía, el señor Diego Mesa, al Director de la Oficina Internacional de Narcóticos y Aplicación de la Ley, INL, el señor Brian Harris, y a todas las autoridades que trabajan por la promoción y el fortalecimiento de la cultura de legalidad. A todos los delegados del cuerpo diplomático, la cooperación internacional, la academia, la prensa y la sociedad civil. Igualmente a todos los asistentes a esta presentación de resultados. Desde 2017, la Oficina de las Naciones Unidas contra la Droga y el Delito, en convenio con el Ministerio de Minas y Energía y con el apoyo
National Against Drug Trafficking and the application of the law, we have been working on the monitoring of the illicit extraction of minerals with special attention on gold. This partnership has allowed us to create a pioneer system where we are receiving annual data of all the evidence of all the alluvial and gold mining in Sierra, and alerts are being defined for the exploitation of the mineral in the rivers. The monitoring model integrates all the official information in regards to the exploitation as all the technical permissions, also the environmental ones to be able to develop this activity. The information that we have for these precious metals and minerals by presenting an integral, comprehensive landscape of the illicit exploitation in each one of the regions, and we would like to congratulate the design of policies in regards to each one of the territories. For 2021, we detected a total of 98,500 hectares, 2% less than 2020. This is dimensioning stability Within the main findings, we have notified that from the 13 departments with Ebola in the country, 3 of these, Antioquia, Chocó, and Bolívar, concentrates 88% of the national detection. On the other hand, the environmental interest tributaries as the national parks, natural parks, and all the forest reserve zones and all the Ramsar sites, we presented 50% of the Ebola land, which is very alarming for all the purposes of conservation and to be able to reach our purposes, achieve our purposes of sustainable. The information systems allowed us to distinguish among different classes of exploitations according to the legality conditions of this activity. We must highlight that 65%, more than 60,000 hectares of the Ebola we have found in the illegal exploitation. This means that in these zones, they do not count with the technical permissions or the environmental ones. Even the exploitation can be increasing in these zones according with the Colombian regulations. Even though this situation has been reduced in 4 percentage points in versus 2020, it is still a reality for the Colombian territory, exposing all the mineral resources in the country. For this reason, it is necessary to develop plans with a specific approach where we notified more than 30,000 hectares in this category, and that coincide with a 30% of the minerals ethical zones that are focused mainly on the black communities. And within other findings, we have some territories where illicit exploitation of gold is being carried out in the free zones of environmental restrictions, is to say, in areas where they can go ahead with this mining activities with the compliance of all the law requirements, offering an opportunity to the Colombian government, to go ahead with some regulation mechanisms that can drive the state presence and at the same time create some conditions that are adequate so the communities can carry out legal mining. At the same time, the presence of Ebola and of all the coca crops are ones that have 38% of these notified territories, which are considered high complexity places where we need to articulate interventionist strategies that are complementary. Thinking about 2021, ULODC designed a pilot model in the municipality of Santa Rosa del Sur, where we carried out an analysis integrating all the alternative development indicators, the data of the consumption as well, and community help. This pilot counted with the participation of the producers of coca leaf, small mining companies, and sustainable ones. Experts, gold transformers, apart from the institutions that are linked or associated to this mining activity. This experience allowed us to notify these international lines. So for the transformation of the territory in a scenario of migration of this illegal economies to legal ones, and the entrepreneur part was also here, and the productive side as well. Colombia is facing new dynamics in regards to the way how illegal groups interact in the territories. For these reasons, it is necessary to explore new activities and new alternatives. In this context, the model of Santa Rosa del Sur can be a benchmark for all the government entities and be repeated or carried out in other zones in the country with the same dynamics. I would like to make use of this time to inform you that starting from June 1st, I will finish my mission as the director of UNODC to retire in my country, France, after 13 years of work with the organization. I would like to thank the Ministry of Mining and Energy and the government of the United States for supporting UNODC in this endeavor and for accompanying the different processes for the design of public policies and intervention policies that respond to all the challenges of illegality in Colombia. I would also like to highlight that we will continue to work on the consolidation of objective data that will increase the creation of knowledge and the strengthening of the institutions to protect the Colombian territory and foster development to be able to reach or achieve our goals in the sustainable development, thinking on the conservation and the sustainable use of all the territory ecosystems of water. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Lepak. I am going to give Mr. Brian O'Brien, director of the section of the anti-narcotic of the United States of America in Colombia. Good morning. First of all, I would like to special greetings to Mr. Diego Mesas, the Ministry and Vice Ministry of Mining, Ms. Sandra, the reps of the National UN offices, Pierre Lepak, and protection coordinator. Excuse me, the sound is not coming in correctly in the booth. And all the people who are accompanying us today, good morning. For the 6th straight year, we have gathered with our peers and friends on the fight of illicit exploitation that's being represented in the in open skies in the 2020. In this way, we would all the legal illicit generate a great harm to our environment. This report would not have been possible without the valuable contribution of the Colombian government that are carrying out the actions for strengthening the mining capital and the defense of natural resources. Of course, I cannot stop acknowledging the Ministry of the Mining and Energy and UNODC offices. The protection of the environment is a fundamental pillar in our new bilateral drug strategy that acknowledges that drug trafficking, the illicit crops, and the environmental crimes have a negative impact in the biodiversity of this country. Better. I would like to rescue some numbers of these reports that have attracted our attention. The departments of Chocó, Antioquia, Bolívar continue to be in the departments where the greatest exploitation is being concentrated. In 2021, a percentage of illicit exploitation surpassed 65%, and the conversion of illicit economies is also concerning some municipalities where we're also seeing illicit crops, and where the quality of their habitants' life is marked by poorness and low indexes of development. These are rich zones of gold are not receiving the benefits in infrastructure and basic utilities that we would expect, and on the contrary, they become illegal crops for these illegal armed groups, and it is very concerning to notice that 35% of the exploitation of gold evidence is found in the forest reservations in the Pacific. As it was mentioned in the report, it counts with the most diverse biodiversity forests in the world. We would like to reject these criminal actions of all these unlawful groups that are ending with the biodiversity and leaving contamination and a lot more poverty. So as part of the memorandum from 2018 of the Embassy of the United States and the Colombian government, we continue to support the fight against the illicit exploitation of gold with the companionship or the follow-up of the Colombian government to counterattack all the illicit economies and all the crimes that are associated with this. And we also support all the corporations that increased 4 times versus last year, and they generated some very good results to be mentioned. More than 7,000 seizures of these heavy machinery and of capturing 129 people who belong to all these organized crimes. In the same manner, we continue to support the investigation of or research, scientific research, and the judicial one, so we can capture more and advance in the process of these utilizing these criminals that are carrying out these activities of the contamination of mercury. We are in the process to intervene 30 hectares of the basin of the river Huachin in the Bajo Cauca Antioqueño, implementing the fetal remedy processes with in the zone with the carabineros of the Policía Nacional. We would like to invite you to adapt our report of 2021 as a consultation document so we can get to know the consequences of this phenomenon that are determining all the alternatives to solve this. The government of the United States will continue to support Colombia with the institutional endeavors against the illicit gold exploitation and all the associated crimes around it. Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. We will go with the technical presentation of the results on behalf of the thematic coordinator of the Digital Procedure Department of UNODC, Ms. Sandra Rodriguez. Sorry, I'm not receiving any sound in the booth, so I cannot translate. I'm not receiving any sound in the booth, I cannot translate. I'm sorry, I'm not receiving any sound in the booth, I cannot translate. We would like to invite you to... I'm sorry, we're not receiving any sound in the booth. This is the 6th report that we're publishing, and this study was carried out with the Ministry of Mining and Energy and with the support of the United States Embassy. Before we enter into matter, I would like to tell you that this is not a census. It should not be taken as a census. We're going to concentrate on the evidence of the alluvial gold mining. We're not going to find anything in regards to the subsistence mining. Before we show you the findings, I would like to show you that this modern system that in the integration of the analysis of the 3 largest pillars, the detection of evidence, this detection of evidence is fundamental in the remote tools. What does this show us? This shows that we identified the evidence of the alluvial gold mining and oeboas as we're going to be calling it throughout the presentation. This first pillar is going to show us where we find all the alluvial gold mining zones and which territories present this, which is the area that is showing this mention as an area. And then finally, we're going to show the dynamics of what's happening from one year to the next or from several years ago to now. And it's very important for us to remember that this pillar is talking about all the globality of the EBOAs. We're not speaking about which is legal or how much is illegal. So now we're going to go with the second pillar. The second pillar makes reference to the legality framework. We find all the evidence exploitation of EBOAs that are complying with the technical requirements, or if they do not comply with them for the activity. This pillar gives us a response of how much the illicit exploitation. If you can see, the first pillar is the dimensions, and the second pillar of the legality framework is telling us where this illegal exploitation found, how much is it, and how much is make out of it. So it's fundamented on the regulatory framework that is in the law 685 of 2001. What is this law telling us? Well, what territories in functions of their characteristics of protection can have some exploration or exploitation of minerals and which ones cannot. So that's what I have called the framework of the exploration. And this is going to give us a breakdown of how many of us we have in the zones that are not legal to do exploitation and the ones that are in the legal zones. And this is going to tell us where are they, how they do it, and how are they related in the territory. So now entering the matters of the first pillar of the dimensioning of the EBOA, we're telling you that this is being created, or this is being shown in the perception and the satellite imaging and the easiness of receiving of this evidence with all the visible prints of the satellite imaging. All these things that we're seeing in the screen makes reference to the modalities of exploitations that we have in the alluvial gold mining in the Colombian territory, the ones on the ground. This evidence, how can we see it? Well, we can see it. As you can see, we have some zones that are lacking forest or green zones. We have some benefits. We have deforestation of loss of coverage, but we also have the removation of the flora. We have some blossoming. We have make reference with the evidence that with the use of machinery in the ground. When we speak about this, we're referring to the we just not do this with these machines in the territory. We also do it with machinery in the water. Why is this different? Because the print is not visible. It's not easy to detect. So for this is generating this type of evidence generated a challenge, a methodological challenge that was addressed with detection remote tools, but using more specialized tools to be able to see beyond what we can see on a normal basis. So in the screen we're seeing the type of machinery that we are using in the reverse to be able to obtain, to be able to see this exploitation of this mineral. Now we're going to show you the findings that we have spoken about in the first pillar, the detection pillar, but make an emphasis on what these exploitations with the use of this machinery in the earth is 98,567 hectares that were found in the territory with this type of exploitation. We see that 50% of this is in the northeast of Colombia, in Chocó and Nariño. We also found some zones that are smaller in Putumayo, Caquetá, in Iria. Mainly, we're seeing the alluvial gold mining with the use of machinery on land. We're going to show you the 32 departments. We have 13 that presented this exploitation evidence, one more than last year. Entering this in La Guajira being part of it now, and now we have some small evidences and exploitations. The Chocó and Antioquia represent 78% of the evidence that have been detected. Chocó is in first place with more than 38,900 hectares, and Antioquia with 37,000 hectares. In the screen, we're seeing the behavior of this, and this is the sixth report. And for this year, we're showing you 98,000 hectares are representing a reduction of 2% in regards to last year. That gives us a stability trend. And what is important to also see here is 13 of the 32 departments are presenting this evidence of exploitation with the use of machinery on land. But we also have some municipalities that are presenting this exploitation. Now we're going to show you the three main ones. Showing showing you right now, which corresponds to Zaragoza, Nochi, and Novita and Chocó, that has 22% of the national consolidation, as you can see here in the screen, which are the top 10 of these municipalities. We have, beginning with Zaragoza, which concentrate the most of exploitation. We will end with the Unión Panamericana. Here we have spoken that the detection in the first pillar is not only being concentrated in the evidence of the exploitation with the use of machinery on land, that which is being addressed from the main principles of explosion. And we have also gave you some alarming alerts that are in the territory in Antioquia. And here we have a number of warnings of exploitation and several rivers, as you can see here in the river. In the screen we have the function of the density is in the works of being classified. As you can see in the gray zone, in these parts of the rivers that have been studied that did not present any warnings. The yellow ones are the ones that least quantity of warnings, and then migrates to the red color that we see in some zones where we have the greatest number of warnings that have been found throughout the study of the 10 rivers that have been studied.
We're monitoring 7,000 kilometers of rivers within Putumayo, Caquetá, Porres, Ruinida, Tabaco, Pureco, Tuenjari. Now let's see the second pillar and its relation to the law and legality. Though this pillar is divided in 3 categories. First refers to the technical and environmental commitments, that is 20% for the evidence of the years, 5 points above 2020. And this refers to evidence of exploitation, EVOAs, that have the technical permits and or environmental permits in order to perform the exploitation activity. Here we have mining titles, concessions, and environmental licenses. These exploitation have the permits in order to exercise their activity, and they are subjected to monitoring by the mining authority and environmental authority in order to comply with the requirements so the commitments are fulfilled. And they have to, once exploitation is finished, to continue with a process of recovering the zones that they intervene. The second category that we find here refers to the category towards legality. Those are that evidence of exploitation of alluvial gold that are right now generating permits or process in order to obtain the technical environmental permits to generate some activity. These EVOA, the main ones, don't have the technical permit in order to exercise the activity, but they have a prerogative for exploitation, because this prerogative, it can continue exploitation, the material, the mineral, but they cannot do it with heavy machinery. They must do it only with manual tools. And here we have certain figures. Those requests for legalization framed in law 685 of 2021 and 695 of 2019. And here we also include special reserve areas. And finally, here we can see what really is the illicit exploitation. 65% of the national data is illicit exploitation. And here it's important to mention that we find here contemplated contract proposals, areas of special reserves, not the ones declared as we saw previously, but the ones in procedures, and also ethnical communities. And this is pretty interesting to mention, because all exploitation alerts due to machinery in water corresponds or are in territories that are within illicit exploitation category. Let's see the third pillar. This model, as we mentioned, states what territories due to protection conditions can actually perform exploration or exploitation activities and which can't. Here we have 2 large territories, areas where we can exclude from mining and those free of sanitary restrictions. And these exclusive mining zones, no exploitation or exploration procedures can be implemented. Here we have national parks, Ramsar places, forest reserves, and 50% of the national data for detection corresponds to this category. It is in areas we can exclude mining, and of the other 50% we find it on areas free from environmental restrictions. They are the ones where activities of mining exploitation can be performed by fulfilling all of the requirements. This means that we need a deed, environmental permit, etc. And this is interesting because in these 2 areas we find an overlap of a third zone. Those are restricted mining zones. In these restricted mining zones, it is possible to explore and exploit mining by fulfilling other requirements under other conditions. And here, generally speaking, we're talking about ethnic communities, urban perimeters, and archaeological areas. That is, the activity can take place with certain restrictions. And with these, we obtain that in areas where we can exclude mining, 26% are within restricted mining areas. And those that are in transit, 80% are restricted mining. And here, in this sense, we are talking about that we have a territory according to Law 668. We have a territory that is divided in 3 regions, and that each element gives us a different connotation for the territory that tells us how to monitor, control, and where can a legalization take place. And within the framework of this element for environmental restrictions, we find that 59% of the illicit exploitation, not of the national data, only illicit, are in areas where mining is excluded. And finally, 89% of the excluded zones are in the Act number 2. And this means that the evidence of exploitation in Act 2 are susceptible of environmental subtraction. That is, they can go from excluded zones and pass to other areas that are either restricted or free, where they can actually exploit mining. Now we're talking about the 3 detection pillars and certain laws or environmental restrictions, and above all, we have certain dynamic. Remember that we have been talking about the historical series. Once we have an historical series, this allows us within the monitoring framework to compare. That allows us to generate multi-temporal analysis, and this talk about change dynamics. Now here we're seeing on screen the first change dynamic, because it states stability. Stability is that within 2020 and this year means that is evidence of alluvial exploitation that are stable. They are still within an area. However, it is important to see here, and I'm going to show later on a graph, that stability needs to be focused or seen in a differential way. One is a stability in an area, that is to say I had 10 hectares the previous year and today I have 10 hectares, but what happens is the stability was not in the hectare, but rather the dynamic took place in depth. And what happened, we have detected since a couple of years ago that exploitations are being done not in an area as such, but in the depths. They dig holes or drill of more than 20 meters down, and here you can see that this orange color is areas that are stable from 2020 and 2021, and they correspond to 76%. However, here we're not talking about the 98,000 hectares detected, but rather an impacted territory. That impacted territory is an interesting concept, because it is not only what we see this year and detect this year, but what was in the previous year and is no longer there. Those are the areas. Here we can see that perhaps they are inactive and they have a certain succession. So the territory refers to these dynamics. We can stake on the second dynamic of change is the new areas. These new areas are isolated. There were no areas, but now there are. There are new areas, no new nuclei of the phenomena. You already see here on yellow color a couple of new areas, and here we can also see an illustration that in 2020 we had an area surrounded by forests with unprotected areas, but in 2021, look at these white figurines. There is evidence of exploitation of alluvial gold. Those are completely new areas, and we have approximately 3% of the impacted territory, and there are 3,060 hectares. So we continue with areas in expansion. These, in difference of the new ones that are isolated focus areas, these are growing. We have evidence of exploitation for last year, and evidence of exploitation for this year actually increased. There was an expansion in the field. And then here we're looking at it. In 2020, we had this area. We had a small area, and look how has it grown since a year ago. This is the expansion. And here we also have approximately 9,500 hectares. That is 8% of the impacted territory, finally. And what gives the connotation as an impacted territory corresponds to the areas or the EVOAs with indexes of certain destructions. They say that activity is no longer active at that point, but rather we start to see grasses, shrubs, and states that activity is no longer taking place. There's a 14,000 hectares that were detected in 2020 that this year were no longer detected. However, they had this other type of response from the territory. Here we can see clearly the presence of grasses and shrubs. Let's focus a little bit more in a detailed manner for the two pillars. Here we have a dynamic that we're seeing. It is a tool in order to focus strategies and design public policies, and linking this or integrating with everything related to illicit exploitation, we find pretty interesting data. And we find that in relation to illicit exploitation, 56% of that detected this year corresponds, it establishes, and it is illicit exploitation, 55,000 hectares. And look, here we are going into the depths. I don't know if you can see this in these photos. These taken from above. So when we surveil the territory, the evidence is ongoing, but we have more in depth. Here we can see a little bit more detailed the wall that is being created. That states that it's not broadening, that exploitation is not taking place on the sites, but yes, they're going in to the earth. And so with the ministry and with the embassy of the United States through INL, we are actually carrying out an investigation and a methodological development in order to identify and start to link this new dimension of the activity, linking everything related to the volume of the extracted material. So we continue with the illicit exploitation in the framework of the dynamic. So we have 7% corresponds to areas in expansion. This means that illicit EVOAs that actually expanded, and 70% of the illicit exploitation. And finally, new areas, we have 2% in this dynamic in function of illicit exploitation. Here we have a pretty interesting data in this historical series that we have already mentioned. And we said that 55% between 2020 and 2021, it is stable as such, but if we generate a retrospective area from 2018 to 2021, we find that 39%, almost 40% of the 90,000 hectares detected for this year were already there on 2018, and those are illicit exploitation. Look here. Here we have three great tools to strengthen the framework in order to formulate public policy, to design and focalize strategies. The first one, the detection that opens the area and legality that sets where it is illicit, where is illegal, where is legal, and where it has technical and environmental permits that, in comparison with the framework for environmental restriction in order to exercise the activity, tell us what are the rules of intervention needed, either monitoring, control, legalization, according to the territory and the particularity of each territory. And united to the dynamic actually tell us what we need to do in an area where mining is excluded. However, the phenomena is expanding. And look here, the system actually brings forth a good battery of data, a good amount of data that allows us to generate analysis and focus our attention and strengthen this framework in order to design interventions. Finally, I want to focus in these special management territories, focusing mainly on ethnical territories and other areas that are, let's say, protected, that are not within systems excluding mining, because they need a special management and they have a different connotation in relation to protection, either protection of plants, animals, etc., but also protection of the biodiversity of our ethnic populations. So in Indian reservations, we have the totality. You have 603 hectares. Here you can see it. Here, one of the dots, you can see this on brown color, and these represent less than 1%. When we start to look, refer to other protected areas environmentally that we have not contemplated in the areas excluded from the mining that we have already mentioned. Here we have 5%, and here we have other areas of not so big, but however have certain environmental protection, and you can find this focused on these areas. And here we have everything related to evidence of exploitation in territories of Afro communities. And here we have 45%. 45%, yes, of the national EVOA that correspond precisely to Afro community lands. And what's happening here? So this is an alert and actually a cause of concern for these territories that we have already mentioned have differential management status due to the need to protect biodiversity. So finally, I want to invite you to actually read the document so you can actually scan the QR code on the screen, or you can also read it through the links of the Ministry of Energy or the UNODC website. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Now we will finish with the Minister of Mines and Energy, Diego Mesa.
Muy buenos días.
Well, good day, everyone. Cordial greetings to Pierre Lapac, the director of UNODC here in Colombia, and also cordial greeting to Barra Harris and all of the officials of the American Embassy, General Barrera, Vice Minister, and everyone here present. Thank you very much, Sandra, for the technical presentation of the report. So before starting with my intervention, I want to talk, of course, about the importance of the report, but how it also fits within our mining policy related to the legalization and also in the fight against illegal extraction. So I like to thank Pierre because this is the third time that I have to do this, but unfortunately it's going to be the last time that we're going to do this together, and thank all of the work and support that we have received in these last 4 years from your office. I also like to thank Ambassador Galbraith that just came 2 days ago. He was a great ally. We also shared this venue many times with the ambassador, and perhaps it's going to be the last time that Pierre and I are going to do. So Brian, you have the relay. So the next year you can work with people from the ministry and UNODC in this regard. So we have largely focused on the energy transition and the diversification and legalization of mining in this last 4 years. These have been the main policies of the ministry, and they are closely linked together because the energy transition needs the minerals, and we need to have metallic minerals, diversify our production, but also to guarantee that it is legal mining, as we have defined in this government. And precisely yesterday, it was something that I mentioned to Brian. We were in the Department of Bolivar celebrating an important milestone of our legalization policy. We, in August of 2018, set ourselves an ambitious goal in relation to mining legalization, and was basically use these 4 years to have 27,000 new legalized miners around the national territory. For those that do not know the area, the figure is quite ambitious, because when you look at the legalization rates of the last 12 years, that is the 3 previous administrations, that legalization rate accumulated in 2 years reached 6,400 legalized miners. So a goal of 27,000 was a multiple of 4, something that was done in 12 years. So there was lots of skepticism, and I have to recognize the team of the ministry headed by Sandra Sandoval in the direction of legalization, because we managed to cooperate with the National Mining Agency, with the departments, with the municipalities, with the environmental authorities at a regional level. And also yesterday in Cartagena, we provided good news for the Department of Bolivar and the country. Yesterday, we reached the legalized miner number 25,000. We are above 90% of the goal that we proposed ourselves at the start of our government. And this required from us 2 main strategies, but many fronts. First of all, be more agile as to legal procedures. That's why the the National Mining Agency was fundamental in order to overcome bottlenecks. For example, yesterday with the miners that we were in Bolivar, there was mostly procedures. That's where they started the legalization like 6 or 5 years ago, but everything was actually stuck. And here the agency made a great task, and we also needed a normative framework that was actually very solid, but also understand different types of minings and has a differential approach. And we already had a legal framework since 2012, but we had to regulate it, implement it, and we've been doing this in the last 4 years, and this has allowed us to have this high rate of legalization. And most surely towards the 7th of August, we are going to reach 27,000 miners, and we believe we're going to overcome this figure. And this issue related to legality is obviously united to the fact that we understand that although there is a great number of miners that have that vocation of legality, unfortunately, there is a criminal enterprise also dedicated to illegal extraction. As a Ministry of Mines and Energy, we have to do everything possible in order to work with UNODC, the American Embassy, and the armed forces in order to have all the tools that will allow us to fight against this scourge. And in this sense, we have already made lots of progress on various fronts. For example, we had Ana Minería, a tool that allows us to get more information regarding mining deeds. We also have Genesis. We also built a mining information data bank that allows us to have greater cooperation with the financial sector and differentiate where we have illicit activity and legal activity. We are also working to have a traceability model in order to get to know gold that is being traded and its source. But this also applies for coal, copper, and other minerals. And also with the Geological Agency, we have worked in having a digital footprint of gold in Colombia through geochemical models in different parts of the territory. So this report that we delivered today,
that we have been doing since 2018. We would like to thank the American Embassy support, which is fundamental in this fight. And we just finished seeing a very technical explanation, but I believe it's worth the while to highlight what is positive in this report, what challenges are we going to have left since we're going to have a new government, and what should they focus on. So I believe that here is worth the while mentioning that when you break down this report, the first thing is that we had a stability in the hectares that are within the alluvial gold exploitation report, and this could be good, it can also be bad depending on the details of the report. We had 98,000 hectares, we reduced to 2%, but we kept it stable, reduction of almost 2% approximately. When we begin to see the breakdown of this report, I believe that Brian and Pierre, there's still a very strong concentration in 3 departments specifically, and the good news here is that just in these 3 departments where we have focused our formulation endeavors as Bolivar, Antioquia, and Chocó. As I told you yesterday, we was in Bolivar, where approximately 1 formalized miner is occurring in Bolivar, and another 1 out of every 5 is occurring in Antioquia. So among these 2 places, we have 40% of these 25,000 miners that have been trained, and out of all these 98,000 hectares, we still continue to have a majority, an area that's large area that there is illegal exploitation. I'm speaking about 65%, but as we can see, an increase in formulation as well. So this is the first thing that I would like to highlight. We have an increase in these areas where we have mining that counts with the technical environmental licensings or permissions, and we went from 14,000 to 28,400 hectares in 2021, so it's an increase of almost 15%. And the illicit extraction evidence, we had a reduction of 8%, 2% It was the general one, but what is covered by the illicit exploitation reduced all the way to 80%. And I would say that this is something positive. It's not a great reduction, but it is positive for us. And secondly, we're also seeing something very positive, which is the evidence of the alluvial exploitation of gold in the natural park of Farallones in Cali. They also had a reduction, and this is also positive. So what challenges do we have left? This is an experiment exercise where the prosecutor offers the public forces can have all the tools to work with. The first time in this report, we had an EVOA in the category of illicit exploitation in the Department of Guajira. This had not happened ever since 2018 when we began to report. And here, specifically in the municipality of Huilla, we see that there's an illicit exploitation, so it creates a concern specifically on the point of view of the protection of our fauna, and because it's in the Piedemonte, and it's very important for us to increase our efforts. So we also see an increase that is coinciding with the illicit exploitation and these evidence that we have in the report with all the coca crops, near to 38% of the territories where we have an EVOA. We also have coca leaf crops. We know the extraction of this has also become one of the main, if not the main, resource of funding for these illegal groups. And the last challenge that I would like to highlight is that from the 10 rivers that we have monitored in this report, 8 of these we also found EVOA of exploitation, illicit exploitation type. So here we also have a challenge to protect these hydric basins. 8 out of every 10 rivers that we monitor is specifically focus on the river of Caquetá. So we have positive news, we have some challenges that we will have left for the following administration, and the message here from our part is that this has been a fundamental tool for the formalization tools that have allowed us to increase this in some territories, but definitely as a supply for the public force so they can advance in the fight against this problem that is the illicit gold mining that has a lot of collateral effects that are negative in matters of environmental, social, and in matters of putting communities under risk that should not be exposed to this type of activities. So, again, I would like to thank the Embassy, UNODC, for all the support, for the team of the ministry, the public force, and the Barrera that has always been one of our great partners with all this, and Colonel Nunes, who is also here in the room, and we will like for this to continue for several more years, and for this to become an institutional report independently from the administrations that are in place, because the only way that we can make this informed decisions for the fight against this criminal flow, as in the project of formalization, is to have the tools that this report is showing us of the alluvial gold exploitation in the whole national territory. With this, I will wrap this up, and I would like to thank you for all the support. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. We would like to thank everyone that connected themselves via internet and that followed our event on the social networks. Whoever wishes to see the report, you can have access to it in the UNODC website. Thank you for accompanying us.